What's up, everybody? This is Nick from tenacitycloud.com with my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. More people than ever are building stuff in the cloud and spending a lot of money doing it. So on this show, we're going to discuss some of the cloud cost optimization trends that are in the market and the things that you can do to, build your own cloud cost optimization strategy. So welcome to episode 4. Today we're going to talk about sort of your infrastructure and, getting that right, getting configuration right, the drift over time, what happens, what to look for, in sort of how to approach it in short form. We'll dive into more nuance around the things that you can do in the specific strategies, specific tactics, even down in the environment operationally. But today we'll cover kind of at a high level what you want to do from a infrastructure cleanup perspective. So, Jason, would love to get kind of just a first thoughts on infrastructure cleanup and its importance in cloud cost optimization. Fire away, man.
Well, first, maybe the first step is to realize that you have a bunch of waste. Like a lot of companies that we talk to, and I mean, you probably have experienced this as well, is it's happened more than once where we identify a bunch of stuff that's not being used because it's underutilized or it's not attached or whatever the case may be, right? And the first response is always very similar. No way. Not possible, right? And even from team members that are managing said environment, and it's not really their fault. This stuff is hard to find, right? I mean, if I go create 1,000 snapshots in EU West 2, which nobody logs into as an example, right? Or something like that. If I replicate them over there and no one ever goes to that region with the native tools within, like, say, AWS, it's hard to find those things. And so, the first step, I think, is just to recognize that you most likely have things out there that you're paying for that you shouldn't be. And 2, that's completely normal, because one of the benefits of cloud is that you can spin things up and turn them down. You can do testing. It's so many benefits that you wouldn't want to take that away. But one of the byproducts of how easy it is to use cloud infrastructure and services is that a lot of those things get left up, and in a lot of cases they shouldn't be.
I think that's a really important point is, there's a time function here, and there's a kind of an obfuscation function here, because as hardware has become software, it's really easy to write a piece of code to, do things repetitively, number one, but also just do things really, really quickly, sometimes just out of the purview of or oversight of a single person or single engineer, which we all knew this person, right, or these people in our past who kind of had an iron grip on what was deployed where, because it was very physical. You could put your eyes on it, you could touch it, and they knew it because they had to rack it, stack it, connect it, manage it, etc. Well, we live in a very different world now. And so, given this time function, and I have observed in our consulting, when you get to a year and 2 years, there seem to be these hurdles that people who've gone through transformation get a year into the new world, or in 2 years in the new world, and they start to see some really funky things in their environment from a spending perspective. This is about the point when they go, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be cheaper to run in the cloud. Oh my gosh, we got to move workloads back. They start to have a little bit of a panic component to it. And our advice by and large at that point is, hold on. You're just experiencing the fact that things were spun up and left, and you need to actually think about, well, what is the stuff in the environment you don't need any longer? Because you really should treat it as ephemeral. You really should treat it as temporary infrastructure that's there for a workload, there for a need, needs to go away. So I think that's kind of the first thing to think about. I think, the second thing to really understand here is that it's not hard to clean any of this stuff up. Like, it's not hard to get rid of EC2 instances you don't need. It's not hard to go set your S3 versioning policies correctly, or to clean up snapshots that are suddenly now 2 years worth of data, as opposed to the, maybe 30 days that you need, or 60 days, or whatever it is. But the actual, caveat to that is, once right, it's actually finding it that can be the problem in environments at scale. And I think that's what we've run into, is that people are surprised because it's suddenly been found. And then the knee-jerk reaction is, well, no, that can't possibly be abandoned infrastructure that's got to have a need. And we certainly have had experiences where there have been significant impacts to cloud spending
in our environment. Right. I mean, we've experienced this. Yeah. We use our own tools. We eat our own dog food. And does it happen? Absolutely. Do we need to go in there? Do we need to review what's been created? Maybe even what's been destroyed because we have teams of people working in this stuff? Absolutely, we need to do that. And so even companies that do this for a living need to do this, right? Like everyone should be taking a look at this, reviewing it on some sort of recurring basis and ensuring that, what their teams are doing and what they're building is, being torn down when not needed anymore. And it's not just that. I mean, it's also, if you've got stuff out there that you don't know is out there that you're paying for, you're most likely not securing those resources in a way, you're not only are you wasting money, but you're also probably leaving some holes open within your environment, your network for bad actors to take advantage of. And, I know this, it's not necessarily cost related, but that will end up causing you, that could potentially impact you from a spend perspective if you have to notify people if, say, data has been breached. I mean, I think the one that sticks in my head is like maybe a few years ago, Capital One left an S3 bucket. It was either an S3 bucket or an EC2 instance that they didn't know they had that had access to said S3 bucket, which had a bunch of customers' data in it. Not used, should have been deprecated, but was left up, and people got a bunch of credit card numbers out of it, right? So, and Capital One's pretty advanced when it comes to cloud usage. So even those companies that have been doing this for years and years and years and years in public cloud environments are susceptible to these things as well. In fact, the more you use it, the more you're susceptible.
Yeah. I think it's a really important point is abandoned infrastructure that's unmanaged is unmanaged attack surface. It's there. So your cloud spending strategy can be a part of your cybersecurity strategy as well. And, you can ask a couple of old hats in cybersecurity. That's us. What's the first thing we do when we start thinking about an environment that we're consulting on or we're taking over or we're building the operational plan for? The very first thing we do is trying to minimize how big it is, right? We want to make it as small as possible. Why do you have all of this infrastructure when you're trying to do this one thing? Like, this is what we should be focused on. And so that's always the first step. I think it's also important to recognize that part of what happens here, especially to those who are new in the cloud, but I think this lives in people who've been in the industry for a long time, is that the way we pay for technology is completely different now. And so sometimes the old mentality of, I already paid for that up front. So if it sits there idle, I don't really care. I paid for it 3 years ago and I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use it next month. And so it can just kind of sit there idle and not really do anything. Well, that paradigm has shifted, right? So when we're in public cloud, those workloads now cost you money while they're just sitting there idle. What you really want to do is be shutting those down, right? You want to be getting rid of those. You want to be standing that up for the once a month that it's needed, or the once a quarter, or if it's, maybe even change your paradigm on, how to invoke that workload. It doesn't need to traditionally be a server, right? Maybe we can leverage serverless infrastructure containers to help us with those workloads that are periodic, ephemeral, as opposed to the mentality of, and we all fall victim to this. I fall victim to this of, it used to be that I bought stuff and I set it up and I kind of let it go. I already paid for it. So why not let it sit there idle? It wasn't hurting me.
Yeah. I mean,
now it hurts you.
Yeah, it does. I think it hurt you back then as well. I think that is more visible by the resource. You can actually see how much you pay for an individual resource now. You couldn't do that when you had, a bunch of VMware, server farms, or whatever you want to call them in your data center, right? So I think the effects were still there, because at the end of the day, if I'm using more for things that I don't need, I'm probably going to have to buy hardware sooner. But it was, when you're making that decision today, you might not feel the effects of it for 2 years or a year and a half, whatever the case may be. And then it just becomes part of the business's normal buying cycle. Like now you're just estimating as the IT manager. You're basically just including the waste in your budgets for the next year and how much hardware you need to buy. Well, now that you can get down to the individual resource, it is cheaper. It's way cheaper. You just have to know what you're doing. You have to make sure you manage the environment right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Jason and I have discussed this a lot, especially with our clients and with our customers, is, when, how to invoke sort of this cleanup strategy in your broader cost optimization strategy. And it's really important to do this first. It's really important to at least understand it first before you get into a commitment-based discount strategy, because you don't want to be committing to spend or committing to use for workloads that are unnecessary. So that's number one. So at least having your arms around it, understanding what you need to exclude and so on, so that you can buy the right commitment-based discounts, have an appropriate strategy there is really important. It's also really important before you get into the refactor stage, because the refactor stage of cloud cost optimization, you don't want to be refactoring a workload that you find out later is like really not being used as intended or shouldn't be there in the first place, or maybe you don't understand the refactor it needs to go through because you don't understand kind of the use pattern, or it's just configured incorrectly, right? So really important to kind of get your arms around this first, and it's ongoing. It's not just a one and done. This has a time function to it. So I can describe actually the number of times that we've gone in to consult and went on retainer to help an organization advise, be part of their cloud center of excellence, and watch over time as we come in and initially do a cleanup and then see that decay, that drift that happens over time, where the next quarter we're already looking at workloads that were part of a project that we're pointing out and going like, well, hey, didn't this project end last month? Why is this still here? There's an expiration even set on it. Like, why is it still here? And so just, having that become a part of the ongoing process. I don't know if there's anything else. Do you have any parting words, Jason, before we close out the episode?
Stop letting your cloud provider rip you off. Turn off your. They're not ripping you off, but
it's designed to be.
You should not be buying. We don't need to buy Jeff Bezos a second support yacht for his yacht, right? Let's try to fix that. Hashtag Jeff Bezos or something like that.
Right. We laugh about this from a security perspective of like, infrastructure does not come secure by default for the reason of they want it to be really easy to use. And part of that ease of use is so you'll continue to spend money there. I mean, it is brilliant, and it is true about product across the spectrum outside of AWS, Azure, anywhere in the world. Make it easy to use. People will consume it.
Cloud usage and cloud spending is cloud friendly, not business friendly. But it's the nature of their business, right? They're giving you the power to pay for things by the SIP. You're going to have to sift through the mess.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a really good note to end on. So thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Cloud Cost Optimization podcast. Tune in next time where we'll dive into another one of these topics. Thanks so much.